Child Development 205, last chapter, 14, very low incidence disabilities. So welcome. So excited. Typically the last class in the semester because I switch up the chapters a little bit, but this chapter tends to be a little bit of a catch-all. But there are limitations, and we will talk about the good parts and the missing parts. Good. And again, like I always, jump in when you have questions. I was telling a colleague about Haben Girma. She is deaf and blind, and she is an attorney, and she does a TED Talk. It's in the module. I'm thinking, I had mentioned maybe last class, like deaf and blind, I still really struggle conceptually with that. I still really struggle conceptually with that. If you can't see, then you can't sign. And if you can't hear, then how do you communicate? So for her, what she's doing here in this picture with President Obama is that she's doing a refreshable Braille. So she reads Braille. People who are usually vision impaired or blind read Braille, but refreshable Braille is this line of the little Braille dots, and it goes down, meaning it clears the field, and then it comes up to represent the letters. And so it goes down and comes up, goes down, comes up. So she's running her fingers across those silver bars, or maybe the one in between, and he's just typing regular, because he could say, hi, how are you? And she can't hear him. Right? But if he says, hi, how are you? And she feels it through her fingers, then she can say, she speaks. Again, she's got the TED Talk in there. She's very well spoken. And if you look in the TED Talk, she has a round carpet on the stage, and she's barefoot. So she can walk around, and she's walking around, and she just has the edge of the carpet. She knows where not to go. I was like, adaptive, beautiful, gorgeous. But she had a story, she had a struggle, and she's written books, the whole business. So good stuff, good on her. Very cool. Yeah, so here's the link there too. I made this one a little bit like colorful and whatnot. And again, this chapter follows I put it in the unit that has low vision and blindness, and then it also has hearing impaired in the deaf community, because this is kind of like both of those things together. What these 3 chapters have in common is that it takes a highly specialized teacher to work with these kids. If you guys are in this class, it's on your brain, it's on your heart to be like, oh, these kids are unique. And we know both of you already work with kids who are unique, but this is like a group within the group, in a very small group within the group. And so I've met students who are like, yeah, I want to work with the deaf community and the deaf blind community. I'm like, wow. To me, if it's on your heart, it's on your heart, go for it, right? There's a lot of different, we've met all the rules, we've read all the rules, we've learned about IDEA, we've learned about the legislation, we learned about FAPE and LRE, and then you're like, you come to these very unique categories of students, and those rules have to really be adjusted based on what the child needs. Professor Fernandez, have you ever had a deaf-blind child in your program?
Yes.
Okay, tell us about that. Can you?
I medically fragile. Mine was medically fragile. So they did not speak. So I was really intrigued that Hayden spoke. I was mostly intrigued by that. They're difficult. They're difficult. They're
communicate with them.
Yeah, through tactile. Everything is through tactile. Everything.
Hand, shoulder, wrist, like every hand, anything, everything.
Yeah. It's really my history has been that it's very, very hard on the family. Very hard on the family.
How do you communicate? How do you say I love you, or what do you want for Christmas, or what do you want for lunch?
Right. It's very hard. And the child I worked with didn't have mobility. And so it's hard. It's really, really hard. It's a small percentage of population. Actually, I think I've had 3 now. Unfortunately, 1 passed away.
Oh, wow.
It's hard. It's hard.
Oh, that's another. Yeah, and then that's another whole issue. I know. I'm working with people and families with medically fragile issues. I that whole piece of being a provider and maybe not knowing what happened to a child or knowing what happened to a child is hard. There's parts of our world and our job where, yeah, the child passes away or the child moves away and you don't hear. There's a lot of non-closure. You know,
it's very hard. Actually, we had a client this Monday pass away, not my patient, but on my team, my behavior team. She went to go see, he had muscular dystrophy, and they are expected to live, you know, till almost 10, double digits. And he just stopped breathing in the middle of the night. Beautiful, beautiful family. I mean, just adored him.
The muscles just stop.
We're so good to him, and then died and just didn't and so it's tragic. Our therapist called me hysterical. I thought like she was in a car accident or something, and she said that he had died and she's devastated and she can't treat anybody the rest of the day. And I was like, oh my God. And then she called me back 3 hours later. She's like, I gotta see a kid. I'm just crying, so I'm just gonna come in and see the last patient. And it was just, I think, more than anything, surprising. It's certainly not the first one we've ever had pass away, but it is a part of it that is very, very, very hard. Yeah.
How do you process as a staff or I mean, you're a director, so how do you do that?
Well, I think we're blessed in knowing that the families we're walking into this, we know more than they do. We knew he was critical. We knew that his that every day was something that's a heavy diagnosis. That's a very heavy diagnosis. It does change the way you treat. I had a child with Tay-Sachs maybe 15 years ago, and again, they no mobility, no language, destined for a very short life. And so it changes your therapy.
Can you really quickly say Tay-Sachs is a rare genetically transmitted, usually in the ethnic and cultural Jewish community?
Jewish community, yes. And they don't live very long. And so your course of therapy is really around the family. It is really as much. And so we just did a lot of like handprints. I would bring in molds and like feet prints, and we took arm, and I did the molds of like
every day was a memory.
Every day was some kind of memorial of what this child, it's overwhelming. It's making me actually a little emotional.
I'm so sorry.
It is like it, but we had the gift of knowing that, where the parents didn't. And I mean, they knew that the child's fatal, but
they weren't in complete denial. But as a provider, you do have more education.
Yes.
And the family is just being a family. They are not
they're taking care of their very sick child. So they get into the day-to-day rut of like, we have to suction him. We have to keep him alive. We have to hold him. We have to do therapy. We have to do this and this, that they don't see the long game, just like all of us in our life. Like we're in school, you're doing finals. Like you don't see 15 years down, like your B didn't make a difference. The long game is different. And so
there's a gift there, because I think we've all had some sort of experience in our life where somebody, car accident, some sort of unexpected. And while that's just devastating, when you have a child like this, like almost like I agree with you, like the devastation is like this cloud, like it's present.
Right. We know
it's present. Right. But at the same time, that presence makes you that much more aware of the value of that day.
Right. And to see a parent's relationship with that child, that's the gift. Like, especially with this client that left, like the love was just so overwhelming and so powerful. You don't always do that with your own kids. I mean, I can tell you today, I've been more frustrated than any type of but that is just so beautiful, those moments. And then to how do you, like, that's always like, we have to give that to the parent to say that is beginning and end, the most beautiful relationship. And so it's hard if you work with this group. It's a different walk.
How do you process it with your staff? Because we're all human, like you said, you got the hysterics, and then she kind of like said, I have a job to do. But
I have to tell you, I've been blessed in the fact that The ones that have passed away, so the 4 years I've been in this business, the ones that have passed away, I have to knock on wood, have always been to seasoned therapists, every single one of them.
Okay.
And that in and of itself has made a huge difference.
Right.
If
That somebody
this
doesn't
would happen to a young lady or a young man, they would need time off. There's
that's
no
why
way.
that's what I'm asking. So when you mean a seasoned therapist, somebody who can maybe process that in a way that's
Who's
more
also had lost themselves. So when you live on this earth longer, you just have more loss. That's just how life is. And so she's had more loss. And so she was able to process this and be that support system for the family, and then call me crying, but not crying, you know. So where I think a new therapist would have just instantly broken down. And that's a hard line. It's hard to break down. You have to have a level of compassion, but not be the victim when the parents are the ones who've lost the
right. I have a whole thing about it's your role as a teacher is not, even though it's so important, it's not about you. And so I'm not afraid of the tears and being authentic with yourself and being aware. And that fact that she could call you and just like dump it is huge. That's a valuable tool that you're providing to them. But I do tell professionals, you're not to cry with the family. I mean, go to your car, like let it out, call me, like whatever. But the family, they kind of need you not to fall apart in a way. Fall apart as you're walking to your car. I don't care. Like they still see you as a provider, as a teacher, as a professional. It's hard. And we're human. And you know, if you do cry in front of them, it's not the end of the world. But like, it isn't about you. I mean, you got the gift of being along that journey with that child or that family, but that's a hard one. That's a hard one. I have to say, I haven't lost any kids. I don't know how I would handle that, but I can tell you in the HIV community, it was a lot. It was very
all the time.
It was very consistent. A lot. I mean, I think I lost a client with the first week I was there, but I do know as a staff, we didn't have a place to go. We didn't have a place. We could like let it out in like a staff meeting, but so I ended up making like, and the HIV community is big about quilts and all this stuff, and I don't quilt, but I like crocheted like just a scarf, like a big red scarf. And then we would take little strips of like ribbon and like just put their initials on it and tie it to the scarf.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And then, every year on World AIDS Day, or if there was a parade that we were doing, somebody would wear the scarf and had everybody's initials on it because there was no way to memorialize. And they're like, well,
as you speak, Professor, it's almost like in that community, you have to almost be careful because as you're speaking, I'm thinking, yeah, you're right. I've had less, but in the AIDS community, it almost could dull you down. I could see that people in that field have had so many deaths that it's just another one. It's just another one. And then that's not good. Like one pendulum to the other. Like there needs to, wow, that is an issue too.
You know what? And it hit me, and it literally, this is like no pun intended, but I had a client who was a 30-year survivor. I mean, this old Hollywood guy, 30 years. And he was in a wheelchair and he had a lot of like other issues and side effects and all kinds of stuff. But he was out putting up Halloween decorations and got hit by a car. That's what did me in. That's what did me in. And that's where I got the thing. I was like, I'm not saying we need to memorialize this person, but he didn't die of AIDS. He was a human being who got hit by a car. I was just like, I was angry and sad. And so there's this piece where you're a provider. And I was with him and his family. They invited me in and we were with him while he took his last breath. And it was like this thing where we didn't expect that to be it was just like, we're like you said, like your like the family of the kiddo or the kiddo, we don't know how much the kiddo actually knows. Like there's this piece where, there's this inevitability, but when that inevitability almost comes differently, it came fast, like for your client. Like I meant like just like they knew it was coming, but like not Monday. Like
right. The level of bereavement is almost like as if your neighbor got hit by a car. Like it just is not the same. Yeah.
It's weird. It's weird. And so I do see as humans and providers, we like, you hear me saying parameters like you don't need to cry with the family. but I had a really big breakdown after that one, like in the car, like the whole, and it's still to this day, quite frankly, I still put flowers on his memorial. Like,
But
yeah.
isn't it funny how it's these? Because I remember the first one that I had lost. I was young, not married, no children.
Oh, yeah, it's
I
hard.
failed in every respect. I was a mess. I did everything wrong. I could.
You have to. How do you do everything right the first time? You know.
But those are the ones you remember. Those are the ones where you step back and so it is. This is human. This doesn't get any more human, and humanness is hard. This is hard stuff. I would expect you to make mistakes. I think that's how you learn the most. I think that's I think that is it's hard. I had a client who lost both of her daughters. They had some weird genetic issue, both of them around the same age. Yeah. I went to both funerals, and the second one I walk out, it was it was too overwhelming. I wish to this day I had never left. That mom sat there the entire time and buried both her daughters. And who am I that I couldn't walk out?
Right. You're just like,
I actually named her my daughter's name, which is Molly, actually. And so it stuck with me that I could not do that. So in those mistakes,
there's a beauty of the lesson. Yes. And I'm glad we're talking about this, because let's say you are blessed and you never lose a client. You never lose a client, and nobody's medically fragile and everything. Even working in the community, even pick one of these chapters and working in this, you guys are going to experience burnout. You've got to be burnt out.
Oh yeah.
The burnout, the day-to-day, or the thing that feels the same, like the same day, like the Groundhog Day, the same day over and over again. That's got to be hard. Have you guys ever experienced like your burnout, or like, I worked with this client and we built the skill and now it disappeared? You guys ever felt like, what am I doing here? I'm not really helpful. Like, have you hit that wall yet? Because I'm not wishing that for you, but the wall is there. We all hit it, and I'm telling you, I went from mental health. So basically like chapter 8, maybe, or 10. I went from mental health to like HIV. So I went from like mental health to like medically fragile. And you're thinking, oh, well, this will be better, or I don't know what I was thinking. But they both have this wall. Even if you worked with children with dyslexia or learning disabilities, or who maybe just are have like small missing digit or a cleft palate, even the limitations, they can kind of build up on you. And there's a wall. Every professional, every category, every silo has a wall. How are you guys doing with that kind of stuff?
Can you hear me? Oh,
yeah.
I have a problem with my mic, but I totally have this experience as you guys are talking, like not necessarily in the classroom yet, but just in like the recovery community, because I've shared about that. Like it's
intense, and it's every week, every day
that we lose people, our best friends, like all the people we initially, like I got sober with, or half of them are dead, half of them are not even there, like basically not living, and there's this weird, like I feel like that sets me up for I don't know, almost a positive way of handling it in the classroom, because like with every, like it's not easier, it doesn't ever get easier. I'm always an absolute mess. It doesn't even matter if they were like my best friend, or I just saw them a handful of times. Like it's basically what I heard is like the first person you lose, so like for me it was my father, like each one after just brings that first one back up if you don't deal with it the right way. So that's what that's why I am just like a mess. But there is just like like for us, there's a sense of hope, and it just like gives you this push to do even better next time, or to help that person even more, or like there's always some sort of lesson that you get out of it, like I guess kind of like what they didn't do, or what they like what they weren't doing, I guess properly, kind of thing.
There's always the shoulda, woulda, coulda. There's always the
shoulda. But like, and then with a kid, like if that was to happen, like there are probably things that like that person did or that I've done that could help that next kid even more, or you always learn something from it, and you always I don't know, I've learned to like turn it around to like, first of all, just being grateful for my life, being grateful for the other kids, maybe if we're talking in that sense of like who are actually around, and I don't know if that makes any sense, but like putting
no,
that
I like,
fire and the passion into the next person. Like that's what we learn in our program is like, it is like, you know, the more you lose, the more like power you get kind of thing, to go on to the next one.
well, almost because you then you understand the value of the value.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but good for you, because I agree. Like it's all relative, right? You're like, this is a massive struggle over here. And even though this is a struggle, it's like, I can do this one, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, and Cece, I'm going to ask you the same question in a second, but I do want to plug, in the future, if you can, guys, take, we have a class that's called, the child as victim, and we're changing it into trauma and resiliency. And so if you guys can take that, it's huge. It's all about, looking at how trauma affects the kids, how trauma affects development, but also for us, a lot of us are the wounded healers coming in to help. It's been placed on our hearts because our hearts are big, because our hearts got pounded thin, so now they're big, right? So there's this piece where we have to take care of ourselves as a tool. And so I highly recommend that class. Highly recommend that class. And so going forward, our entire institution is going to be pushing or adapting or adopting policies that are focused on trauma and resilience, because a new, like you were just talking about how you've lost these people, whether they're acquaintance or like dear friends, but the percentage of identified college students with diagnosable clinical depression is over 50%. Over 50%. So there's this piece where we can't say we are here to educate you. Here's the thing: education comes because you have mental wellness. And so we're really looking at that to make sure that you guys are provided as students a way to cope and a way to get back. I mean, we really thought we'd be getting back to normal at this point, but the struggle is still very, very present. And so we're really trying to support you guys, like as a well-rounded, like you would look at your kiddo in your program as a well-rounded, the whole child. We're looking at you guys as a whole student, a whole human. And so please, 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 self-care, trauma and resilience, we're here for you at any point. So if you guys ever are struggling, even after this class, please keep our information, reach out. We're here for you. Absolutely. And Cece, all right, how do you deal with like a bunch of rough days in a row? I mean, those kiddos can't be easy.
Yeah, they're not easy. Like I know that in the past year, how are we talking about like of losing someone that, we taught or tried to teach. It wasn't that I lost somebody I taught or tried to teach, but it was their sibling, because he was already dealing with a lot of, I probably like built up anger, and he's only a second grader. But like a lot of things because his parents are going through a divorce. And then on top of that, during the pandemic, they were starting to see, like when a lot of kids went back to school, a lot of pneumonia building up, because, they're just not used to the environment anymore. And so his sister passed away in her sleep, like right when, the parents are getting a divorce. And then so he already had a lot going on just for himself, of like trying to, stay focused in school, trying to just be in an environment where he can get along with other kids. And then that happened. And then he doesn't know how to deal with it because he doesn't know his emotions yet. And he's already getting like an IEP or like, different assessments. There was trying to get him in therapy. And then that added on to it. And then so he, saw a break of his parents, not fighting, and then them taking turns to pick him up. But then that happened. And then there was a lot of blaming of, why it happened when it was just pneumonia that, was the cause. But then he started blaming himself and then acting out. So now they're doing another diagnosis of maybe it might be like the emotional behavioral disorder and everything. And like, yeah. And then so it's just like all adding that to it. And then he's being separated from his like same group peers and everything, and having to be with the older ones.
And how
that's
old
in
is
our
he?
program.
How old is he?
He is second grade. So what is that? 7, 8, maybe?
And how old was the sister?
Sister was not even in preschool yet. So like maybe 4 through like 3 or 4. And the fact that like when she used to come, I always say hi. And it's like, it's so hard because he was like getting on the verge of being good. And now it's just up and down.
Well, think about it. It takes a big brother like that amount of a couple of years just to get used to having a little sister.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden getting used to not having a little sister. I can't even imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how do you handle that? How do you handle that?
I mean, like when we found out, it was really hard because I'm, at work when we found out. Like the police officer came, told our director, and then she told us. And then like, she brought us to a separate room individually, but then having to go the day to still teach the other ones, and having to put a face on, not showing that emotion. Of course, she allowed us if we needed to go home, but like even having to look in the parents' faces of the conversations we used to have, and I can't have them no more because anything could have slipped. And then just having to deal with that, like having to lose somebody that you've seen every day, that was hard. I mean, it took a minute. It took a minute.
Yeah. So what do you guys do to because again, we're going to get to talk about multiple disabilities, and, there are some things that will happen. I mean, how do you guys decompress? Or, I know holding it together all day, I think we can, and it's okay if you can't, but like, then how do you let it go? How do you balance out? How do you make yourself feel better?
I mean, usually with me, my family does believe in God. So me, I, pray. And I also listen to music. Sometimes like when I'm like angry in a moment, okay, this is random, but I have to listen to like rock or heavy metal. I don't know why. No. It just helps me.
No, that is definitely vicarious, like getting it out, like the speed metal, like yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I listen to like random music that I would never really like just ongoing like listen to, and then I can calm down and at least be around family.
Yeah.
That just helps me, and then eventually like I'll just go on my phone, play a game or something, and it helps me. So just relieving really through music helps me.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm glad you guys have some good skills. And Molly, what are your go-to copings now?
Sorry, what were you saying?
What are your go-to coping? So when
oh my gosh, rough. I have a lot. I have learned a lot in my program, but baths are a huge thing for me. I really like baths, and I do a lot of like meditation and stuff. And
real quick, on your bath, do you do magnesium, like Epsom salts?
I do, yeah.
Okay, because Epsom salts is good for all women. It's magnesium. First of all, stress depletes our magnesium. And then when our magnesium is depleted, then we get osteoporosis. So there's a thing, right? So I tell everybody, take baths, take magnesium baths. Oh, Luisa's here. Yay. Take magnesium baths, because if you're going to be in the bath, get some magnesium into your body that way. So keep going. Yeah, hi, Luisa. We're talking about coping strategies when things get tough.
Awesome. Thank you.
And then like the biggest thing that I learned was just to talk to other people. Luckily for me, like I have meetings that I go to. I have like a sponsor, like this is getting into the program, but like I have all those things that like I call this person and I talk about it, we process it, we do this whole thing where we like write it down to get it out of you. And then we see where we can either, like if I get stressed out, let's say like with a coworker or something, I can see where my part of it is, or if it's just like I'm burnt out, I just getting it out and fulfilling myself with like baking and baths are like my two biggest things, things that I love. and sharing about it, like with the deaths, like that's what we do. We go into a room and everybody talks about it and we get to share memories, or we just talk about how we're sad. And then from that, I don't know, just I believe that like it gives it less power at when you get
Releasing
it out
it.
of you.
Yeah, releasing it.
Yeah.
When we're holding on to stuff, that's never a good thing.
Yeah.
Never, ever. Yeah, what you resist persists. So get it out,
Even
decompress.
journaling, like that helps a lot of people.
So again, in this category, you're going to see multiple disabilities. I did put a little 2 cents in here. When there's one definition for multiple disabilities, why are there no other defining organizations? Remember how in other categories there's like NAMI and then the APA and then the IDEA and then this is such a, it's almost like, I honestly, in a way, this is a catch-all group, but at the same time, it's so unique. I don't know. I think there could be a little bit more here, and we're seeing stuff kind of come up, and Professor Fernandez will talk about that a little bit. But again, multiple disabilities. This is not the kid who has ADHD and LD and maybe a little bit of EBD or something like that. Those are silo categories, and they can all be together. But this is one that is almost like so severe, like very rare, very, very severe. So like this young man, he might be missing an arm and looks has like a little speech issue, and he's wearing gloves, and so there's a lot of things going on. And so honestly, I think this is where, Alicia, this is your wheelhouse in a way, right?
It was initially when I taught like years ago. It's not anymore. I would say autism is more my wheelhouse now, but yes, this is, yes. I loved these kids. Yes.
Just intensive supports. And sometimes when you had like in other categories, you have a kid who goes to speech therapy or whatever. This child may have like 7 different supports, and they are in schedule city all week long. And so, and you know what, we didn't even talk about that, like therapy fatigue. You know, sometimes we call it, and I don't know if this is the correct term or it's just a casual term, is like therapized.
Oh yeah, I use that word all the time. The child becomes therapized. This child, not so much, this child, but you know who does? This parent becomes therapized.
They get, so basically what that means is like, your schedule, this kid is scheduled like 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, driving him here, driving him there, have somebody in your house, somebody going here, doing blood draws, doing appointments, calling the insurance company, blah, blah, blah. That thing where you just get like, I'm telling you, sometimes I get I'm not even close to this, but like sometimes the phone rings and I'm like,
right.
He was on it, I cannot do it.
I do think if I could have added, like looking at this child, I think of like a lot of encephalopathy patients and stuff like that. And looking at this child, I think when I could only add that I don't think that the chapter did a great job in this type of patient is this type of client, the level, it exceeds IDEA. It exceeds 504. It exceeds the things we've learned. It falls into the medical realm. So it's these kinds of families, they need a lot of support with nursing, with institutionalizing, they call it, in institutionalized deeming, which is a whole nother category. So these kinds of, basically, when I looked at this chapter, it is really that the client is birth to death without question, without ever without question. And that's what's really hard for the family, because early intervention or youth in and of itself is such a hopeful time. You don't know what, the parents are like, we don't know, maybe he will see, we don't know, maybe he will hear. We do know. And so then that's when this whole other category of people come in, because this time is such a small blip in this human's life. If their organs are strong, you're talking from birth to death, and that has to be paid for. And that's when the family has to really seek out other sources. And the chapter didn't do that. And unfortunately, no one does it well, because we don't do it well, I think, is what I would say. But that is certainly an area to look at, I think, with this clientele.
There's just a lot, and you're right, it's way more medical stuff. And when you say DME, that means medical equipment. And so, yeah, or maybe the van has to be adaptive, or the chair has to be adaptive, or they have a G tube, like a feeding tube, or like a colostomy bag, or so much.
And these kids, you don't like to even talk about an idea. They can't even go to school without a chair that they can be safely transported in without liability.
Right.
Okay, so the chair can be anywhere from 5 to 20 grand, and a parent's going, I can't afford that. And so just right there, like your child, the parents says, my kid can't even go to school. Like, and so that's great idea is there to help this 1% of this population that's not helping me. So it's just like wall after wall. It's a very unique, almost like its own caseworkers, if you could. It's just such there's another part of this group of clients, like DME is perfect. Taking a bath. How does a mom bathe this 14-year-old young man? And he's not 14, but he will be.
Right. And there's a point where you can lift them or you can't lift them.
Right.
And Louisa, I missed your hand. I see that your hand is raised. What did I miss? Do you have a question, comment?
I just wanted to comment, like I had learned in my counseling 152 class, a quote about how a lot of kids and people with disabilities will spend so much of their lives in therapy and learning how to kind of like live life, and they don't even get to actually do it because they spend so much time in therapy. And yeah, it's unfortunate.
I can tell you as a person who's done ABA inside of people's homes, and let's say I saw a kiddo on a Tuesday afternoon, and then I came back and saw him on a Friday afternoon, different kid, because they were just irritated and they're over it, they need a break, and so do the parents, and then it's a thing. And they're just like, I had one kid who had 2 cochlear implants, and he would
leave. Yep.
pop them off. I was like, oh, this is gonna go well. And there's a thing, and then the mom's looking at me like, you can't, please don't cancel session, like just because I'm refusing. I'm like, no, we'll hang out, we'll do some stuff, we'll take it easy, and we'll build some skills and take turns and things like that. And or let's start with the grilled cheese sandwich,
right. I was just like that, that's when a good therapist or a good teacher or somebody who's worth your kid works generalization. You have to stand back and say, you are not going to get optimal, but get 40% of something really good.
Do something
do something different. So then therapy doesn't, because I do agree with you, Louisa. I would kind of say it's like Lovas, we're trying to change that. We need to change that. We all need to work to change that. That if it's only therapy, it's not purposeful. It has to be purposeful. So if you're spending all your time in a classroom, you're spending all your time in the house doing trials and drills, if you're spending all your time in a clinical setting, it's not purposeful. So fix it as the professional. Change it so that it becomes purposeful, because you can build that into the classroom. You can build that into the therapy.
It's just like we're human, we're working with humans who are having a human experience, and all kids are going to have good days and bad days. You and I are going to have good days and bad days. So it's this thing where we just got to do our best, and it's sometimes when they need a break, we need a break. Absolutely. No, last week I lectured from elsewhere. I went to San Diego for 2 days. I was like, I'm out of here. I need to change my bubble. I did grading. I mean, not in this class. But I was like, I did a lot of but I was just getting out of my bubble. And the bath thing that you said earlier, Molly, is this is something I learned maybe about 5 years ago. It was women, we are more fluid. We are more water. I don't think we drink enough water. I don't think we, if there was 10 humans on the planet, we'd all be near water. So water is a very human, very important thing that we do not do right. So baths are great. I'm a big fan, if you can find a magnesium float tank. It's a little out there, but it's super intense. There's ones that are these little clamshells that you there's so much magnesium in there. You float like the Great Salt Lake. You literally float. and it goes into your, like, literally goes in through your system, into your muscles. Again, most women are magnesium deficient. So like if you want like a full thing, and then there's these ones that are like sensory deprivation tanks, and a lot of people can't handle those. But I love them. Like you're basically in a massive like walk-in refrigerator that's full of magnesium, and you float, and it's dark, and all you hear is your own breath for an hour. Very intense, very, very therapeutic. But also consider, like, you know, if you can do it, like massage, or there's magnesium, like anything like that, taking supplements, whatever, because our bodies, if they're not balanced on the inside, we're not balanced on the outside. So I'm a big fan of that stuff. And I have a couple more people chatting in. Jump in. We don't have to like be so formal about the chat. Oh, okay. So look, you guys can look up flotation tanks. There was one in Costa Mesa. It's not there anymore. There's one opening in San Juan Capistrano. There's one in Newport Beach. There's one in Corona. There's one in Orange. Kind of like Tustin and like Lincoln. That's the one I go to. Yeah. So check it out. I got that. I think I found them on Groupon. So check them out, and do pick one and check it out and see if you like it. Do the one that looks like a big clamshell first, because you can leave that completely open. And there's like a shower in the room. You like shower, you get in, you're locked in, like it's your time. But the one that are like in a big tank, yeah, it's like a shower in the room and a big tank. I actually keep the door cracked open, but it's dark in the room. But I'll get like, I don't need sensory deprivation. I get like a little breeze across my skin, and it to me is a balance. And so, I mean, big fan of that kind of stuff. It's kind of out there, but it's pretty intense. But yeah, do the research on magnesium tanks. It's really awesome. So that's my 2 cents on that one. Did I miss anybody raising hand? Yes, no? Just jump in anytime.
No, thank you.
Yeah, good. Okay, good. And then this chapter does talk about traumatic brain injury. This is the piece where, kind of like Cece was saying, is like, you have something that shows up out of the blue for something you wouldn't expect at all. We all might have that story where like you're in high school, and then like over the summer, there's like that car accident that was full of kids, and it's like tragically everybody knows somebody who knows somebody that happened to. Sometimes you get kids who come back who were a neurotypical student, and maybe even like the quarterback or the star student, and they have like big stitches, and now they have to relearn how to walk and talk. And so they went from no intervention to a pretty level and intense interventions. I had a student in my class a few years ago who at the age of like 19 had like a stroke. Like out of the blue, she had a stroke. There could be genetic disorders that do that. And she's like, yeah, I had to relearn how to walk and talk. And, you know, people don't realize I have TBI. She's like, I had to wear a helmet because my gait was off and I would fall. And yeah, so this big piece where this TBI is usually, when they call it traumatic brain injury, it's usually a surprise. And if you've seen like those YouTube videos, you know that it happens. There's people who have these great ideas. I'm gonna, do a water slide off the roof, blah, blah, blah. And then TBI happens. It could be an accident. It could be all those different things. So again, we have multiple definitions, but not on other ones. So again, IDEA says traumatic brain injury. Again, it's not something that happened before birth. It didn't happen during birth. Any TBI is anything that happens after birth. It could be a toddler learning how to walk and hits their head hard enough to where it's not like a concussion. It's beyond concussion. And then National Institute of Neurobiological Disorders, again, causes damage to the brain. And then the here CDC, right? Again, it has to be considered relatively severe, or also would be considered concussion. Again, if they don't recover, then it's not a concussion. So again, if you've been hospitalized and it's more than a concussion, right? Again, it's usually a concussion or more. But again, you're going to see these different things here. And again, I have to tell you, my son's only had like one concussion in his whole life, and I saw it. Like they were out at Peters Canyon riding their bike. He fell off his bike, and about 30 minutes later, he threw up. And I was like, oh, there it is. That's the concussion. I was thinking like, oh, autism with a concussion. Hopefully this is not forever. And it was fine. He was fine. But this video here is this young man, basically, football player, same thing. He had a injury, a car accident or something like that. And yeah, big gash in his head, and just trying to get him back to, he basically was in therapy for like 2 years, and how do you get back to normal, right? So again, we're not here to diagnose, but if you're seeing stuff that happens and the child's behaviors are a little bit different, like on a, you're like, this is interesting, I wonder what happened, be clear with your data. Don't say, this child's off. You can say, they're super distractible. They can't sit for more than 90 seconds or 9 minutes. Like if you can start operationally defining or be very clear in your definition of what's different, then you can go back and say, I've noticed these things, not like, is Dylan's acting a little different to you? No, be very consistent with your data. Professor Hernandez, what would you like to say about data? Because you're the data queen.
Oh, well, data is everything. But I mean, you guys know that. Like, we can't say anything without knowing what we're saying. Like,
right, because I can tell you as a parent, if somebody came up to me and said, Peyton's acting a little bit weird today, I'd be like, that's every day. So can you please be specific?
Right. He's yelling more in the class today, as opposed to yesterday. He only yelled 3 times, but today he's yelling 54 times. Did something happen at home?
Oh, yeah. And again, my 2 cents on data is that our ABA, who's in our home, the supervisor came to me, a lovely math major. He's like, I never thought I'd be doing this work, but it's all math. I was like, yes, it is. He came to me and said, this is the data between the 2 different therapists. And did something happen at this time? At this time, I was like, not that I know of. And sure enough, it was about 3 weeks prior. And sure enough, diggy. Yeah, my son was assaulted on the school bus. And so the data came to me first and said, look at this. And then I dug, and sure enough, boom, this thing came up. So there's a piece where like good data can actually really help intervene. Because what if you didn't have that? Would have never known, would have never intervened. I mean, it was, yeah. So always be clear in your data, especially even if you're talking about, let's say you're not collecting data, you're not doing the numbers, but you're doing this qualitative piece, which is like, I noticed that, she's a little bit more disorganized. Well, tell me, what does that mean? Well, she used to be very meticulous about her desk, and now her desk and her backpack are just like blah. Or she's rubbing her eyes a lot. I mean, probably like maybe 6 times an hour, where I never saw that before. So you could put a number to it, but even on the qualitative pieces that you don't have a number for, be very specific. Again, one of my friends was an RSP aide, and it was I think I mentioned this in the seizure lecture, that the student, she had an accommodation or modification to take one of the large scale tests or her exams or whatever on a computer. But my friend was sitting at the 90-degree and saw that the child's eyes kind of did a little twitch. Like when you're looking across somebody's eyes, you can see the surface of their eyes. And she's like, she saw this little twitch, reported it to the teacher, reported to the parents, suggested to the parent, you may go check this out. Sure enough, this young child had seizures. She had these very specific seizures. And my friend just saw it and was able to report that and get some treatment there. So again, be clear. Don't just be like, oh, he was like super like, yeah. So in fact, today I was at school and it was like 9:30. And he's like, Mom, I think I forgot my meds. I said, I'll be right back. And that meant his school's 15 miles away from home. So I made the trip. Like I was like, we're not gonna gamble this one. And on deaf blindness here, this is again so fascinating to me, how people are able to manage with can't hear or can't see. The definition of deaf blindness here again. Now remind you for the chapter on the deaf community and then the chapter on vision loss, there's different versions of that, right? Some people who have vision loss have zero vision. Some people can see shadows, some people can see light. Same thing with the deaf community. Some people, there's zero hearing. Sometimes they can hear bass noises. Sometimes they can hear high pitched noises. Sometimes they can hear loud noises, or sometimes there's zero. So again, you can have a person who is deaf blind, who's legally blind, but can still see some things, or they're legally deaf, but they can still hear something, or a version of any of those things, or zero of those things. So again, more than one definition, I think is always great because it tells you the different cultural pieces of it. So deaf blindness versus deaf blind, pretty much the same thing. But to me, again, I look at IDEA, and again, it is policy for the educational realm, whereas something like the National Center on Deaf Blindness, that's all they do. That is their wheelhouse 24/7. Where IDEA does a lot of different things, and it's focused on the educational environment. The National Center on Deaf Blindness is literally just focused on quality of life for people who are deafblind. So you can see the two different things, one school and one is like a holistic. And so again, be aware when you see these definitions, where they come from and why, because that helps, kind of puts in perspective. But can you imagine for a second not being able to see anything or hear anything?
No.
So again, I have to tell you, when I mentioned sensory deprivation, like I can take it down to about 90%, 95% deprivation, but I still have to have like a piece where I'm still feeling stuff and hearing stuff. And yeah. So, but I couldn't imagine completely. It's wow. It's I maybe that's just a way that I'm kind of exercising my little venture into something like this, but it's a really interesting thing, because we process so much information in our universe. Just actually my hands doing this gives different information into my brain, right? And when you have none of this stuff, you're not getting that information into the brain. I'm not saying that a person who's deafblind can't feel that it's cold outside or it's raining. They can. But again, our brains are wired based on our experiences. And if there's less experiences, like we talked about, children with lower vision are less likely to get up and cross a room, to make a friend, to find a toy, to do anything, because they are not aware of their environment. So again, our ears help position things. Like if we hear a train horn in the distance, we can sort of position where that is. Is that 1 mile away or 5 miles away, or is it 10 feet away, right? So when these pieces are missing or impaired, how do we manage our humanity in terms of our sensory input and how our body moves in the universe and how our body, it's just amazing to me. So again, but look at this, additional disabilities. 75% have speech or language impairments. If you can't hear language, how do you practice language, right? Same thing with the deaf community. 67% have cognitive disabilities. So you might get, IQ issues like earlier learners. 60% have physical disabilities. So again, there's children who have different abilities to walk or not, or in a chair, or in kind of limited.
And again, if I could point out, when you're saying 60% have physical disabilities, almost 70% have cognitive delays of less than 1%.
Right.
So that's the crazy part. So almost more than half of that whole group of clients doesn't move. More than half of that group of clients is cognitively impaired, and 3/4 are the communication is limiting. So I mean, like that's like you say 75%. Most people but if less than 1%.
Yeah, 3 out of 4 of the less than 1% of this 10% of the students identify. So it's a very small group of people and students and children. And they use this, they use the term heterogeneous, meaning so different. Like you can't say, like in every category, you can say, oh, you've met one person with autism, that's one person with autism, they're different. But this group can be so different. If you say I am an instructor of deafblind students, and we'll talk about TVI in there, it's just amazing to me that you can't even predict what it could be. It's so, to me, it's like, it's so intense and it's so unique. If, like I said earlier, if it's placed on your heart to do it, but right. it's a very specific carve out.
And then also too, realizing too, from a teacher's perspective, that your resources are less, because only 1% of if you were to take, the whole pie, that's such a small percentage of the pie that's gone into it. 1% of the resources to the families. I think if anything, I would have to say social media has helped that. You have a family in New Jersey of a child or a teacher in New Jersey can reach out to a teacher in California. We couldn't do that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So you become that 1% has to grow. And I think that I've seen that as a gift in terms of like, just even in autism. So reach out, because the resources are limited in terms of knowledge and what to do. And, oh, you did this, even like you think of like the dog video you sent me, Professor, like if somebody were to send that video to somebody in Montana that was like, oh, the switch button, I'm going to run to Staples. Like it's those kinds of things that keep you from burning out, that keep the momentum going with this kind of clientele.
Right. And so I encourage you guys to go through these hyperlinks. I'm not going to show them here, but this family with a deafblind child, this was, they're in the UK, and they're just the kindest, sweetest. And they talk about the kid and how he is with his brother. And this kid's like rock climbing in an indoor gym. And I'm thinking, yeah, because all he does is, and I was like, you could see this family constantly touching the child, and he's got a smile on his face. And I'm like, oh my God, like good on you. And they're so positive and sweet. And I was like, wow. And then this second resource, a Special Books by Special Kids. This is an entire massive channel on YouTube. I strongly encourage you guys to subscribe to it. This young man, he's probably 30. Young man, I'm so old. He's probably 30. He was like an athlete, and he was getting his teaching credential, and he was getting his master's, and he started working with, like, I think he was trying to do adaptive PE. He has this big story, and he had this viral video that came out maybe like 10 years ago of he was the teacher in class going, you're amazing. Like, there's a kid in front of him. You're amazing. You're awesome. You're creative. You're kind. Don't let the world stop you. I'm here for you. Like, he's doing that. And the next kid walks up and he's like doing the thing. And he's like, and you're just like, oh, how sweet. That's totally awesome. He's like supportive and listening and knows each kid, don't let the world tell you that you're not good enough. You're awesome. Like, and you're like, how sweet. And then this guy, he started interviewing or he started meeting more people with these very rare conditions. And he started as like he was going to write a book, like have a book on each disorder. Like this is a child who's deaf. This is a child who's blind. This is whatever. And then it just kind of snowballed into this big thing to where he now like travels the world, and he just sits with these young people, well, not maybe young people, just people. And there might be somebody who's got a rare genetic disorder. There's somebody who was a burn victim. There's somebody who's schizophrenic, or somebody who's dissociative, or somebody has these rare, like Williams syndrome or Marfan syndrome, and he's just so present with them. I have to tell you, my cynical side is like, is this guy for real? Like, he's kind, and he's present, and he's like sitting with these people, and he's like, can I be your friend? And they're barely talking, and it's just somebody who's just being present with somebody in all of their glorious limitations. And so Special Books by Special Kids, a fantastic YouTube channel. Look it up, and you can look under like any disabilities there. Like, I mean, the unbelievable. And then there's kids who have like, they're interviewed with their parent, they're interviewed with their sibling, and like, what do I love about my brother? He's so fun, and he's ticklish, and all these different things. And you just see the joy. You just see the joy in people who would naturally be struggling, but there's this
is gonna be fun.
Sorry, I looked it up as you were saying that. Sorry.
And he's like a nice, kind, and I'm serious. Like, there's parts, like sometimes I watch him and I'm like, he's so nice. Like, he's so kind. And then you're like, is this? And then I have to be like, okay. And then I have to be like, Marianne, you have, like, it's okay that people are kind and nice, and like, just let them, like, I'm like, my cynicism has to like, but like, it's it gives you all the feels. It's very heartwarming, and it just kind of snowballed into something really, really cool. And so he has his own story. Like, if you look in that channel, one of his videos is just about how I got here, and it was just an abbreviation of that story. But yeah, he's like a nice Southern young man. What is he, like 30, 35, maybe, I don't know.
Just even looking at the clients that he is interacting
diverse.
with is a
looking at all the thumbnails, you're like, wow, that person has no eyes. That person has no eyes.
This man's poor face was completely burned off.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah. And he's like, hey, tell me about yourself. What do you like to do? Can I be your friend? If you wanted to make a friend, what would you say? And then there's people who have like such limited language, and the mom's got it. The mom's like, oh, I know exactly what he's saying. You're like, I have no idea what that was. But it's really, and it's a lot of the rare stuff. There's like Angelman syndrome. There's, I mean, just the genetic stuff that like 27 people on the planet have, you know, and he's sitting with them, hanging out with them, getting to know them like a human being. It's very heartwarming. So please, so to me, so I put Jace here is deaf and blind. So that's why I put that, but it's like, to me, like portal, like it'll open up a lot for you. So sweet. And again, like it'll show up on my feed and I start going down this rabbit hole. It's really, really fun. So prevalence and placement. Oof. The smallest is the smallest category out of IDEA, and usually placement, like Alicia said, Professor Fernandez says, like they don't typically, you're never going to see them in a gen ed. You're going to see them in a highly specialized environment. It's sometimes they're getting the education in a hospital. And there are nurses and teachers in hospitals who educate, right?
You can get a credential for teaching in a hospital.
Yeah, it's very, so I tell people when they're just like, I'm not sure if I'm going to go to nursing or I'm going to go into teaching. I was like, what have you done? You can, and it's very specialized, and but if that's your groove, then let it be your groove, right? So again, if you look here in this last 5%, which is the smallest, like not the 2%, the 2% is developmental delay, but we've changed this a little bit. Out of this 5%, you then break this all the way down. Like a TBI is less than 0.5% of the 5%, right? 2% would be this dark one, multiple disabilities, again, but intense, right? And then this, look at this 0.02, you can't really tell is black, deaf blindness. Often referred to as the 1%ers. It's even less than that, 1%ers. So again, if it's here, if it's on your heart, you might have some interaction with it, you might specialize it, you might not. But again, this is from 2016, so wow, about 5 years old. National deafblind child count now. National, like we can get the numbers granular. I mean, it's older, but in Washington D.C. at the time of this, there's 15 children who are deaf and blind. I look at this, Mississippi, no data, 2014. Right. But here, look here. One of the biggest numbers here in California is the largest. Why would California be the largest?
I will let a student answer. Go for it.
Anyone? And this is percentage wise. So it's not like there's more student. Well, no, I'm sorry. This is an actual count. So 2 reasons. California has more people. And why else?
Is it because we have more programs or like more schools that will provide that?
Yep, more services, more abilities for assistance.
And we're counting.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say that, but like California and New York are counting. Obviously, Mississippi is not. Like that's a huge difference right there. Data.
Data, always data, always data. Right, and again, this is just the count. This doesn't say where they're actually getting educated. But look here, inside the regular education class, greater than 80% of the school day, multiple disabilities, 13 TBI, deaf blindness, 23. Interesting. That means that they have refreshable braille in the classroom. That the teacher's speaking, it's getting closed captioned into a refreshable braille system, or they have an aide sitting next to them typing it in as the aide is listening to the teacher. That's mind-blowing. That's intense. I actually put a video in the module of this Russian guy who says this is what refreshable braille is, and he has his iPhone up there on the screen, and he shows you how he scrolls between each page and how he can pick a song based on what's telling him. You're watching his hands. And he's like scrolling, you see it, he has the image of his iPhone. I think it's like iPhone 4. And then he's like, but I'm going to pick this song. I'm going to go to my music button. I'm going to go to this tab. You're like, what? And he's like, just the whole time, just on this little keyboard. And you're like, that technology has been around. So since an iPhone 4. So at least 10 years, 15 years. Unbelievable. So again, here, look at, as this number goes down, this deaf blindness, parentally placed in private schools. Yeah. So this is kind of interesting. I thought the numbers would go up as we went into more specialized education, but correctional facilities, there's no deaf blind services in a correctional facility. So there's several reasons for that. Typically deaf blind people aren't mobile enough to, to break the law in which to get incarcerated. But homebound hospitals, 3%, residential 7%, separate school, inside a regular class, less than half the day, right? And so again, accommodations and modifications we're still looking for least restrictive environment. If it's best to have a student in with their typically developed peers and they just have the accommodations and modifications, great. Because again, it's helping them have a typical experience, but it's also having neurotypicals have an inclusive experience. That's the point. And again, the TBI, half are just back in the classroom, right? Multiple disabilities, same thing. So there's a bunch of in it. And again, you know what? Before we keep going further, let's talk about what the chapter's missing, Professor Fernandez, because there could be another category here.
Yes. Well, when I was reading the category, maybe I'm just biased, but I feel like there's a category of these 1%ers that aren't addressed. And I think it's the severe autism category. So when we talked about autism, autism's leveled out 1, 2, or 3. So typically a child, your third level is your highest level, or the most severe, if you will. And so they tend to be nonverbal, really struggle socially, tend to not be able to independently perform daily living skills. Okay, so then that's your highest level of autism. And then there's these group of autistic kids people who are categorized as level 3 autism, but they are non-communicable, which is just like level 3. They are unaware of their environment. They're very unsafe. They're constantly sensory seeking. They tend to be cognitively impaired. They tend to be hyper mobile, constantly seeking sensory. And so in my head, I consider them to be a very serious risk for me, dangerous. I'm always on high alert with these kids because they're the elopers that are eloping 100% of the time with antecedents that I am not registering 90% of the time. And so, whereas opposed to your level 1, 2, and 3, even your nonverbals, they still have 1 or 2 words. Like, let's say they want a drink. They'll say cup. They won't say, I want cup or I want a drink, but they'll say cup. But then there's this whole group of children with autism that will not say cup, that are cognitively impaired and will never say cup. They are the ones that at around 7, 8, 9, we see max out. And I find that group to be not represented anywhere in this book. And I if I had to add something, I would put them into this low incident group, a subcategory of autism, because then what I'm saying is that these kids have the same diagnosis as Elon Musk. And that just doesn't make sense. Like if I'm going as a teacher to treat a child who can't sit, doesn't talk, flaps, shakes, runs, is sometimes potty trained, most of the time in a diaper, and then there's Elon Musk. Like it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And
it's
so
a spectrum, but that's not exactly.
It's a spectrum, but one's on planet Mars and the other one's on Pluto. And I in order to help the families, in order to give the teachers the tools, in order to know as a teacher, who do I resource out to? Where do I get the curriculum to support these kids? It is not in the Elon Musk category. It is not in 1, 2, and 3. It is really in this own group. And so they are the 1%ers of the autism group. They are the 1%ers that need lifelong care.
Right.
That will always be unsafe, if you will, in our world and always need support. And so that's who I would have added to this.
No, I think it's great. And so I switched over to the ncsautism.org, National Council on Severe Autism. Fantastic. You just told me about this tonight, which is fantastic. If you look at it, there's a profound difference between people with autism who can speak and reason for themselves or have problem behavior, and people with severe autism who need 24/7 care or who have severe complex or treatment resistance dangerous behaviors.
Yes.
Literally, I was driving home from San Diego. There was a bumper sticker on every window of this car that said, "Teen with autism on board. May, in case of emergency, may run away, may resist help, may flap, may is a nonverbal," and it was just like a list of like 5 things. And I thought, oh my God. And I couldn't really see in the car, but I saw almost like an adaptive like car seat. And I thought, oh yeah, that's a life. That's a big, intense life right there.
And so like, if you're a teacher and you're a special ed teacher and you get a class, like SIBs we talk about all the time, right? Nobody wants an SIB, but I can't,
if you're not sure, self-injurious behaviors.
Yeah. I can't even tell you the difference between an SIB of a 2-year-old who drops to the floor and gets angry and bunks his head on the wall. Like he's upset and they bunk their head. All kids do this. This is but that is considered an SIB. So you'll get another professional tell you that you have a child who has an SIB. Okay, that is totally different than a 5-year-old kid with autism that is constantly hitting their head over and over and over, and then causing traumatic brain injury, welts, hand, over. They're 2 different categories.
This guy's got injuries on his face right here.
Right.
Yeah.
They're totally different. And yet we've locked them all in. So it's like saying that blind is one, deaf is another. That category is definitely combined its own category. I would be the first to argue, having treated both, that category in and of itself is different.
Yeah, and these films in here are intense, are great though. But this, like this one, they're in a couch. He's with a very strong young man. Look at, he's got muscles, and he's in full protective gear, and he's in the whole thing because this kid is flailing. This kid is going to hurt himself or the therapy. It's like it's.
And he has autism.
Yeah.
How do you even begin to start there? Like, okay.
Yeah. So this chapter, I would agree. Like, I think there should be a piece here that has to do with that, like, because it's a little bit on the rare side, but it's so intense. It's not something that we can just group into autism as its own category.
They're more specialized. Those people that treat those kids need to be more specialized. Same things that we looked at in this category, the low incidence ones. It's the same reasons. The only thing I would say is different is that you are going to, because autism is bigger and it continues to get bigger, unfortunately, there's a higher likelihood of somebody that is severe autism walking into your classroom than there is of a deaf blind walking into your classroom.
It's actually a little bit more. Yes.
So
there should be like another category, like, right, there should be another column right here.
Yes.
And say severe autism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. Again, I've worked with students who, detached their own retina by hitting their head on the walls.
Yes.
I've, again, had my glasses broken on my face, legally blind, legally deaf, with autism. And again, her only form of functional communication is to take off all her clothes. So severely autistic. And the mom was like, so when can we get her in a group home? I was like,
right.
It's not gonna happen.
Right. And this is the path you walk. And these are the parents that are grouped with the level 3. These are the parents that are like, well, Rain Man could be in his house by himself. And you're like, no, this is a different group of
and that's a Hollywood story. That's not
right. We need to resource out to a different kind of group, more like this group.
Right. And again, accommodations and modifications come with the limitations or the needs of the student. It's hard to even group and talk about it. It's like, you do what you do. We talked about it last week about like the ability to switch on a dime or to use or be creative with what is needed. It's huge because every single one of these kids are so different. People are so different. Again, so, and maybe this man, he can use a computer. He's smart enough to do it, but he needs a specialized mouse, and things like that. So again, these are the list of things that you could use, but to use them, you have to know the person very well. You have to know what the goal is. Is it sitting in classroom? Is it learning? Is it, this guy looks like he's doing some sort of, he's either learning or he's doing some work related things. Again, it's challenging. It's challenging. And again, we talked about the School for the Blind in Santa Ana here. We have multiple disabilities that are there now. So there are some students there who are deaf and blind. And so again, we can't assess them by using a Scantron or doing a thing or doing a worksheet or an oral presentation. Like, there's different things you have to do with them, right? And maybe the skills that they need to build are how to do a button. Notice she's got big buttons on her sweater, which is great. This is probably a crayon that's like super duper adaptive. Sometimes you put a crayon inside this grippy thing. So again, are we doing what we need to do for that child based on what they're learning or what they're doing? It's you're constantly adjusting based on what you need that child to do in the moment, right? Even a trip to the restroom, there's learning things to do, but it's also very intense because maybe they're in the chair, like she said, like they're in diapers, they're ripping off I had a girl who would like claw at herself, and so we used to have bandages, and then she would claw at the bandages, and yeah, she would claw at you, and it was, just a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff. Early intervention is great. The more support you can get in earlier, it helps to also develop team building, or again, getting the parents to skill build themselves or take a break, or there's a lot. What is early intervention scanning? Usually the deaf blindness is identified pretty early, but shaken baby syndrome, sometimes, that again happens after the child is born. So it's technically TBI, or they can kind of slide into this multiple categories. And then more videos here to watch. So a lot of cool stuff that's out there. And again, I like how you did talk about social media and internet is bringing people closer together. I do currently have a student, college student, who's a very rare genetic thing where the mom had reached out to me at the beginning of the semester. And I was like, well, I can read your emails, but I can't respond because the student is 18. Mom shared the whole story, and she's like, we literally thought she was the only person on the planet with this rare genetic deletion, missing pieces of the genetic piece. And I'm telling you what, that student, I think she's getting the highest grade.
That is so, I know that you can't say anything, but gosh, that mom, I mean, how much do we love our kids that we're like,
well, she's like, mom's like, I'm a paralegal now.
Yeah, I'm probably learning how to, because this child, like, you're gonna do it. I'm here for you.
And then you also see this thing, and no matter what the disability category is, you see this thing where sometimes, you mentioned earlier that you had a mom with 2 children who had maybe like these disorders or whatever. Sometimes you'll see one that's very intensively on the spectrum or needs all the supports for whatever category they happen to be in. And then one that's like highly normative and super achievy and stuff like that. You'll see this thing. Sometimes you see this, or sometimes you see this, like both students that are very intense or very children who need all the help, or you'll see ones that are just like, I've seen it. I've seen this is disparate, the different ones, very common, like where you have like this one maybe didn't get all the genetic stuff, and then this one over here is like, was like doing all these like special things, and they're getting a 5.0 and they're doing all this stuff, and they skip 4 grades, and you're like, ooh. So sometimes, again, that's another piece of the puzzle where you have the parents who are like have such an intense child who needs intense supports, and another one who's like almost like balancing it. It's wild. I mean, I was like, again, I was at Peyton School today, and there's a family, and I was like, there's the one, and then there's the one, and you're like, wow, it's interesting. It's really interesting. School years can be very, very challenging because they're not the typical school years. It depends on what the child needs, right? There's just a lot. And again, there's a lot of different interventions, and we talk about like, universal design, for learning. But again, this is where Braille comes in, and this is where different, again, we've talked about all these disabilities. but again, you kind of use what you need to use. You need what you need. Interveners. Ooh, this is a big one. Okay, so if again a child or a person can't speak or hear, they have to have somebody who almost is their ears and eyes, and that person's called an intervener. It's basically like I'm reading society and I'm providing the information to this person that's coming through me. So they literally intervene, right? So so Luis and Gloria, there's that video, and then the intervener and students working together. It's really interesting. It's beyond ABA, it's beyond ASL, it's beyond hand holding. It's intense. It's intense. But again, people really love doing this kind of stuff. So again, if it's on your heart, there are actually, there's a video in here, specific programs and master's degrees that are interveners. It's like a paraprofessional, but like super specific for people who are deaf and blind. And it's really, really interesting. So keep doing your research in here, but it's so rare unless you walk into that world, into that field. You're not gonna, yeah, it's an interesting thing. You take all the skills that you've learned working with all the other students, and then you kind of like hone it down and pick and choose, and then realize that that child or that person is best served in a very highly specialized program. Do you have programs that you refer people to if they're not a great fit? Like you said, it was, yeah. So what's a more intensive program than yours, Alicia?
Blind Children's.
Okay.
Blind Children's Learning Center. Absolutely. I refer to them a lot.
Okay.
Blind Children's takes everything, everyone. They're great. Yes, when they're like that. If they're a level, like if they're a level 3 autism, I would refer to more of an adult type of place, only because physically they tend to match better. And the child tends to need a lot of physical support to keep them safe. Like we saw, like that child was in full gear.
Yeah. And again, when there are interveners in place and it's a good fit, so basically you would have, let's say this is the student who's learning, and we call it community-based instruction. You have an intervener who's learning here, who's really intervening between the person who wants to buy a cookie and this, a typical worker. So interveners are almost like the eyes and ears for everything. So again, community-based instruction is huge, because these students aren't going to be taking anthropology and doing, a micro econ and doing linear math. Maybe yes, but most likely no. How do we get them to function in society is really the deal. And again, he's ambulatory. He's well dressed, so fantastic. But again, you're going to get a lot of students that have like those recurring medical issues. But CDI, again, community-based instructions, and sometimes it's creating a visual map and making a schedule and things like that, or just teaching somebody how to read a bus schedule. I have to tell you, I had never ridden a public bus until I traveled, and it was Chicago. And Chicago has a pretty sophisticated transit system, and it was like, oh, crash course on reading, and I only got lost once, which was good. So, but that's a skill. That's a skill to be able to say, this is a chart, and this is a time, and which way is north, and which way is south, and which is east and west, and blah, blah, blah. And what do you do? And how do you pay? And where do you sit? And how do you exit? That's a huge skill. That is a huge skill. And learning, I mean, like I said, it was a challenge for somebody who was relatively neurotypical, and being in, having a little bit of a culture shock, and it's a big deal. And so having somebody who helps that to help a person be successful, that's, and now we also have like the access bus here. And I don't know if all states have that, but here in California, if a person qualifies, they're on Medi-Cal and they have all the different supports, they can call access bus, and then it will pick them up, and it's like $3 a one way. It's kind of like Uber, but it's like it's like a public bus, but it's the small white one. And so those things are absolutely usable. But again, sometimes people aren't a fixed income or have no income. Right. And so $3 one way is a big deal. So there's different pieces of the puzzle that we'd like to put together. But again, people in situations, yeah. And for me, again, with the book, I would put the origins as history first, just so I can be linear. But I literally found 2 videos of Helen Keller. I'm gonna see if I can find, let's see if I can do this one. I'm gonna try to do it. Sometimes it doesn't work with the audio when I do it this way. And I've been working on it for about a week. So now I was really excited to get this one. Oh, can you guys hear it?
You saw Helen Keller.
Yes.
She was 6 years and 8 months old. She had been blind and deaf and mute since her 19th month as the result of an illness. She had no way of communicating with those around her except a few imitative signs that she had made for herself. A push meant go and a pull meant come and so on. She had observed that we did not use the hands when we were talking to each other. And I let her see by putting her hand on my face how we talk with our mouths.
So again, this is a child, Helen Keller, before the age of 2. So she did hear sounds. She did hear language. She may have developed some language, but this was their own system that they learned to do. Can you guys can see it? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool. This is their own system that's going to scroll in real quick, but this is their own system they learned how to do. But for people who have never heard language or were around language, they might not. You're going to hear Helen Keller speak. And then there's the other video, if you can see in the feed, she's actually speaking there. But it's a person who has had limited exposure to language. But if somebody who has 0 exposure to language would have even more limits.
She felt the vibration of the spoken word. Instantly, she spelled, I want to talk with my mouth. That seemed impossible. But after experimenting for a time, we found that placing her hand in this position, the thumb resting on the throat, right at the larynx, the first finger on the lips, the second on the nose, we found that she could feel the vibrations of spoken words. For instance, the throat, she feels the G, the hard G, G. And on the lips, she feels and the K sound. On the lips, she feels the B, and with the second finger on the nose, the nasal sounds, the 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 first word she learned to articulate was the little word it. With the hand in this position, I made the vowel it. She felt it. It. Then I made the T. She feels it with the finger on her lips, on my lips. Then I put the 2 letters together to form the word it. And the first word was learned. After her 7th lesson, she was able to speak the sentence word by word. I am not dumb.
Unbelievable. First of all, you see at the bottom where it says 1930, right? So we're looking at 100 years ago. Wow. First of all, and you know the intelligence factor it take to like learn that system, and then
I'm watching this and going, do you know how many kids I swipe their hand away from my face? Like they're always trying to claw it. And she was like she let her position in, and you're like, what are you doing? I just can't even. That's beautiful. Creativity.
So this is the beginning, though. This is the beginning of it, and then it evolved into this next one. Now I'm going to show it. I'm not going to show you this whole thing here because okay, I have to tell you, there's another one that says the one on the side says Helen Keller speaks out. It's a little bit more produced, and so like if to me it has like this little Disney version to it. So there's like this dramatic music, Helen Keller and learning listening to, I mean, it's like, it's a little dramatic, but it's very dated. Like I feel like it was almost a PSA of the time. So again, so this is 1930. So seeing her, she's young here. And then in this next one, she is older. She's like, maybe in her 60s or 70s. But you see no hands on the face. So it evolved into this, and they'll show you a slower version of it, but man, it's ASL, but it's not. It's mind-blowing to me. It's just mind-blowing to me.
Friends would walk up to me and just be
There we
like,
go.
what the f is in your mug? And I would
It's
tell
not
them,
coming. There we go. So Braille, she's reading Braille.
It's a remarkable woman. She's Miss Helen Keller. She does not see the room or the book that she's reading. She sees nothing. She does not hear the rustling of the curtains behind her. She hears nothing. She is deaf.
I mean, it's a little dramatic.
But if you enter a room, she will know it. Your lightest footfall will tell her you are coming. Or even tell her who you are, if she knows you, if she knows her old friend, Polly Thompson. Polly has been with Helen Keller 40 years. For nearly half of these, she's been Helen's only companion. Helen's eyes and ears about the world. She talks with Helen by a finger system in which each letter has a sign, like this. Reaching out beyond her dark and soundless night, Helen depends most on touch. Two other senses remain. There's taste and there's smell. Scent, the scent of objects and places and people.
So again, we've learned that some when other senses are lessened, other senses are heightened. But if you see what I'm saying about the highly produced piece, I think it was kind of like a PSA where they're trying to say how tragic her story is, but how she's overcome it in this piece. And then she's actually going to speak. And it's like I said, when kids are learning how to speak, you want to go for an 80-20% approximation. It's not there. Like you can kind of hear what she's saying, but the woman ends up translating all the words. And it's very dated. So I'm going to say this is maybe, it doesn't say the year on it, but I'm going to say, so it's black and white. Oh, I don't know, 1955, maybe somewhere in there. So we're now 25 years later, maybe a little bit. I don't know, somewhere in there. Because we had colors around 1950. Well, let's see, I don't know. But this is not quite the 60s. It's not the 70s. So it's somewhere in the 50s. Again, you saw the finger spelling, right? All the mind blowing. How does one teach that, learn that, or come up with a system?
Creative, beautiful minds.
She ended up, being a professor. Well, Keller being I was like, yeah.
Helen much that we learn with eyes and ears. But her hand is her chief link with the outer world, with Polly, with Anne, the part-time helper, everyone she encounters.
And that's because the other woman, she doesn't know this.
She reads Anne's lips. She answers her voice.
Yeah, see, she doesn't know that part.
It is an unnatural voice, and it is her great sorrow. For all her years of effort, Helen has never learned to speak clearly. It isn't strange, for since she was a baby, she has not heard a word spoken nor seen lips forming one. But let Helen, with Polly's help, tell you. It does not blind his lips, or is it lips that burden me down. It is not blindness or deafness that bring me my darkest hours. It is the attitude that I put men in not being able to speak, not merely. It is the acute disappointment in not being able to speak normally.
So nobody talks like that anymore. It's the acute disappointment of having these big words.
I gotta say, her grammar and syntax is spot on.
Like it's almost like I feel like it's like I watch like the old Bing Crosby movies. It's like it's right in there. It's like culturally, like she's wearing, like, look at the style is the 3 pearls.
No, she looks beautiful. Who did her hair? Did she look? She didn't look in the mirror and say,
exactly. That's what I'm saying. So like you know, so like all these pieces have come together. She just happens to not be able to see or hear. And she's speaking, but that again, that's not a 80-20% approximation, not at all.
No.
If your eyes were closed, see, I think she came out and came back in. If your eyes were closed and you could kind of just relax into what she was saying,
Yeah, I closed my eyes.
Get it.
Yeah.
But again, the greatest sorrow, like it just is a little dramatic, but it's culturally appropriate, very culturally saturated. So I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but again, if you look on the feed, there's more deaf and blind. I'm being me, Heather. Like there's a bunch of different things in here. So there's so much more. But again, if this is 100 years ago ish, this is something I like to throw out real quick. So Santa Ana College in 2015 was 100 years old. This campus was built in 1990 ish. So 106 years ago, Santa Ana College, but by the way, had ASL classes in 1915.
Good.
Right. So think about this for a second. When were cars invented? Around 1915. How many cars do you think were in this area? How did people get to college? Not on the bus. There was no buses. Horseback, walking, horse-drawn carriages, the whole business. Going to college to learn ESL in Santa Ana. Like, it's just mind-blowing. The need is there, that it was organized at a college to provide that for people who, unbelievable, just blows my mind that the need is always there and the community is always trying to support it. In some, I mean, 100 years ago, we were offering ASL classes, not these classes, because these, I think this is very, very proprietary, very specific, but unbelievable. The fact that, quite frankly, 100 years later, we're still kind of in the same boat, really. I mean, there's more technology, but that doesn't mean that the ears are fixed and the eyes are fixed. You know, it's not like we have that stuff yet 100 years later. So again, when we talk about the history and all the business here, I mean, this is her as a young baby. This is her right here. And this was that first woman talking, Anne Sullivan. So again, it's really amazing that we've had these limitations and we've been able to live with it. Look at AmericanAncestors.org. Keep doing your research on this. So they mentioned that she had a disease or she had an illness, and so they weren't sure if it was rubella. I think there was it her? She like hurt one of her eyes and it translated to the other, like infected the other. I forget what Helen Keller's thing was, but again, between 1962 and 1965, a lot of people were affected by rubella. That's one of our vaccinations that we get when we get boosters. MMR is the rubella, measles, mumps, rubella. That's what the R is. And so a lot of that when people got rubella, especially women, when women were pregnant and got rubella, their babies they came out deaf and blind. And so there's this big piece. And again, all about the vaccinations. It's like, well, make your choices. But we don't have outbreaks like that anymore. Hopefully not anymore. But again, measles kind of showed up, remember, a couple of years ago. And then even before I left county, we were talking about smallpox, but we always kind of revisit that, whatever. But again, there's this piece where, you know, now we're going to talk about all these different supportive activities. This guy, he made this place called Morgan's Wonderland. It is actually kind of like it's like a mini Disneyland, but it's super, super interactive and highly sensory for people who are like limited in their senses. But again, there's these other resources here. Please look those up. A lot of different, and even since I wrote this, maybe a year or two ago, much more things. And yes, a lot of typos, but we're good because typos shows us we're human. And then prevention, we talk about accident prevention here, and it does say that more young men have TBIs. Sometimes a book will say you can prevent all accidents. I disagree. I think for a person being a self-proclaimed klutz, my husband said if they invented clothes out of bubble wrap, I would get those for you. I was like, yeah, and I would still hurt myself. Shaken baby syndrome is 100% preventable. That's stressed out parents shaking their baby, and they can sometimes snap the spinal cord. Now you have a paraplegic child. Yeah, so 100% avoidable. But again, that has to do with the supports in the system and people who could reach out and ask for help or have a place to get support. Not everybody can have that. And technology, we talked about that. There's all these different pieces, but again, you can look at these websites here and talk about, it shows you all the different little pieces and things like that. It's really, really cool. So, oh, and then switches, all these different switches. And I like, so again, for us who we have like on and off switches, there's these different switches that do different things for people. And the human spirit is 100% adaptive. So always keep that in mind, you know. Yeah, I sometimes, like we mentioned earlier, working with this community helps us know how to work, how just to be human, right? Again, we don't talk about inspiration porn, how that their hard life makes our life feel easier. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that sometimes when you help a person, it helps you. Who did I miss here in the chat? Cece. Oh yeah, yeah, Cece, we understand tech issues. And again, Haven Girma, this is I think this is her her TED talk here. Oof. So yeah, summary. We did a lot in here. Ooh. Coincidence. Yep. Lots of stuff, but very rare, specific, but almost like the most, I don't know, I don't want to say heartwarming. That's not it. It's almost like the indelible human spirit, I think, exists here. This is the one where we all see people, no matter the category, rise to challenges and face the odds or keep a great attitude and things like that. We learn from others, right? I feel like this last chapter, even though it's a little bit more dire, it's almost like the best representation of the indelible human spirit. I mean, unbelievable. Please watch those videos that I put in there because they're like, oh yeah. And then again, the special books by special kids, fantastic. Go down that rabbit hole and you guys will see. Let's see if I can find one up. See if I can hear SB special books by special kids. Yeah. And so let me see. Here's, oh wow. Siblings with fetal alcohol syndrome. Wow.
This holiday, save on all the best gifts. From
Oh,
all
an
the
adoption
best
story.
brands. Get 25%
No,
on
thanks.
Champion.
So you two are sisters and you both have fetal alcohol syndrome. Does that mean you're exactly alike?
So fetal alcohol syndrome, usually we talked about that in intellectual disabilities, but this is the channel. And I get subscribe. And if you look here, I'm just gonna click on the channel. Again, rare syndromes.
These people are amazing. Like,
yeah. Sweetest Sophia, Strom syndrome. Yeah, this man is a burn victim. Schizophrenia, the comedian without eyes. Yeah. And again, this is a day in the life of the family with 6 blind kids.
jeez.
Right? Or an interabled couple where she's like physically typically developed and he's not, and they're together, right? And so again, this is a whole section on autism, CP. So if you're not ever sure like what things are, here's the couple who they both have intellectual disability and they're like, it's super duper in love. And he's like, she's so hot. And she's like, yeah, I am. It's so fantastic. Biffin and Turner, this is like why I love my brother so much. He's so much fun and so sweet. So we meet somebody with craniofacial disorder, Pfeiffer syndrome, the only known case of Grayson syndrome. Unbelievable. Autistic man with schizophrenia and psychosis. Oh, yeah.
God.
Right. And you're just like, how? It's like just the humanity, like I said, the indelible human spirit exists here. Surviving a stroke as an infant. Yeah. Yeah. The mom's like having a hard time. My friend with 2 faces. Right? Living with an unknown genetic syndrome. Right? So things like that, like, again, this young man, he's like out to normalize and befriend people who are different. It's really, really beautiful. It's really, really beautiful. And yeah, I guess subscribe to support or whatever. He talks about it when I was a teacher for students with disabilities. I originally intended to be a book written by my students. It grew to be a video of interviews. And so he started a nonprofit.
I think just getting those kids on the screen, because I can tell you the first time you see something like that, it does jar you.
It does jar. It is jarring. It is jarring.
So the more we're jarred, the less jarred we'll respond.
It's weird, but never dull your response to people. It's okay to have a response. The autistic rocker, being the loner cycle, breaking the loner cycle. Schizoaffective dad, that's a person who has like schizophrenic tendencies, but also mood tendencies, like depression with schizophrenia. Tyler the jokester, fascinating Finn, the extra set of Y chromosomes, yeah, adapting to the loss of movement, so as their disabilities progress. So this is a fantastic, like, I typically bring it up towards the end because we could go down this rabbit hole like every chapter. So it's one of this piece, and you're just like, it's a great resource to have a read in it. Prater Willie, yeah, I worked with a child like this, Prader Willie syndrome. Yeah, and so it's spinal muscular atrophy, Down syndrome, pituitary dwarfism, 6 invisible disabilities, generalized anxiety disorder and panic. This is a college student. That's very typical. Managing schizophrenia as a new mom. Yikes. Knowing that your child has a 25% chance of having schizophrenia. A quadriplegic and his caregiving wife. Living joyfully while nonverbal with autism and Down syndrome. Nager syndrome. Schizoaffective. Yeah, so yeah, there's a lot here. There's a really lot. Autistic in 2020, going with the flow. Yeah, super fun. One of a kind Jacob. So good stuff in here. But again, the indelible human spirit, I think, because of their rareness, 1 to 3 new stories each week. My gosh.
He's just a traveling man.
Yeah. And he was just like, yeah, I figured I'd go into teaching because, as an athlete and I didn't know what else to do. Think you found your calling? It's just like, I'm going to stop this year and then I'm going to stop